In this video help, we're going to be covering the Manpower Portal. We're going to step in the Manpower Portal and we'll start looking at it. Before I get started though, I want to explain something about the technology of project management. There are a lot of companies that make millions of dollars by providing either software like Microsoft Project and those other items that go out there and do all kinds of analytical things to manage a project. That's fine. But when it comes down to the production organization that's going to be doing the output of the project items and building all these things and engineering them and so forth, all that analytics stuff that's done should be done by admin people or a supervisorial project manager like the lead project manager or the chief engineer. It depends on the size of your company if you have employees and do that. But it comes down to one thing. When you start to do a project and you've done your planning as far as the project management as you're doing it, you're coming up with a budget and you're doing a timeline for time that it takes for things to be done, it comes down to manpower allocations and all the things that are involved in the manpower application. In this screen, what we're doing for this project, we have a project manager that isn't responsible for overseeing the budget research and the planning and so forth that are in that particular area all the way through all the things that we're doing here. For example, we would use project scheduling, scheduling portal, project planning, and the portal for that, task manning, project budget, final. We got a marketing budget that we do at the top, and when we get down to the bottom of this area, we should have a project budget and the project budget that has to be released to the marketing group in order to provide them with the numbers that they need in order to bid the proposal. But along with that, you need to bid and understand project specifications that are required, the drawing packages that have to allocate the information for either production or other things that have a drawing package that backs them up, like purchasing the items for inventory and doing the actual purchasing, and then supplying those items from suppliers and recognizing the suppliers that you have to work with and getting the quotes from the vendors that are going to provide you with either services or hardware. And then the next thing is inspecting the items when they come in and also inspecting the final product as it's going out as a deliverable. And then if you need to, you need a labor and materials way to estimate the actual things that you're producing. And those can be done in invoice or a work order to produce those. For example, a form that can be given to the builders, the people in your employees in your business, or the vendors to identify the things that they have to do in order to reach the final product and a submission for QA and then being done. Well, one of the things that's involved at the very top of this is when you're doing the manpower allocation, you're looking at each individual that's going to be working on that project, and you're going to get an estimate based on their expertise, whatever they are, for what they're doing. In this case, most of the first things that I'm putting in here are all about working with the proposal, budget planning and research, and you pick the person or people that are involved that have the education and background in order to quote correctly what the process is going to take. It could be a simple administrative thing like tearing down the WBS and figuring out how it's going to be put together as far as the tasks that need to be done. And that would be budget research. And going all the way through all the steps we just talked about here, you have to estimate for your marketing group and for the production group that have to measure whether or not you're doing it correctly or have done it correctly. You have to create a manpower allocation. And it would take whatever number of people to provide the, in this case, budget research and producing a work breakdown structure and providing the information to each one of the engineers either in meetings or face-to-face to get the individual numerics of what you're having to do on that particular element task, and then costing it out for this particular element. You can pick the engineer or people, and you can add additional employees as you need to for this project. You can go through, add their rate. The way you do their rate is you can create the rates for the individual people that are unloaded rates, and the cost involved with that so that you know what it's going to cost. Then you take a budget amount available. This may be provided by the production manager for that particular area, or maybe your marketing group has put a top number that you can use to do each one of these task elements. Then you have a budget amount used, so you can calculate whether or not you did it within budget. For example, if I'm doing $130 an hour, like here for an engineer 2, and I'm going to take 4 hours to do this task, I end up with $520 to do this task. And what you're doing is you're doing all the things that are involved with this task. If this is a simple labor thing and I'm budgeting the labor, that's one thing. But I also need a sign date when this was assigned to me, so I have a timeline knowing when to do it and when to start it. I also need to have a start date, which I'm supposed to start it on, and then an end date that I estimate within this record for doing this task. It's not enough to say I'm to do it in 4 hours and take 2 weeks to get at it. You need to know when you're starting and ending and when it was assigned to you. Then you have all these elements, like you could have the budget remaining based on the hours that you used. So imagine if I put in here a budget, I know that it costs $520, and maybe I put in $560 as far as the allocation. And it comes down here and says there's a full $560 left. But if I now do $520 worth, and the amount used was $520, I had $40 remaining at this thing. So you can see how the math is calculated within the screen here. If you were under budget, that's fine. If you run over the budget, now we're going to want to go down here in the narrative and explain what happened or what was occurred and what part of that cost was consumed or overconsumed. And this is like doing your travel when you come into after you've done something out of your office or whatever. It may be a meeting somewhere or you traveled to a location. You had to do labor. Maybe food was involved where you had to feed yourself. You had a hotel bill. Maybe it was air travel to get there. And maybe when you got there, you had to have ground travel. Maybe you rented a car or you paid for travel on the ground travel. If you had to entertain the clients and take them out to dinner or whatever, or have meetings and some cost was involved, then that would be in here. Business expenses, if you had to have something copied, printed, or anything that's related to business expense, that would be in here. And then you have other. Maybe there's services that you had to have. Maybe something either in the hotel, like you had to rent an office or something like that, or do office things from a service within the building or from another company. All these things have to be considered to come up with the actual travel and all the costs that are involved with doing this task. Now in this case, we're very simple. 4 hours, $130 an hour, $520, used $520, and $40 is left over. This gives a tremendous amount of information to your project manager and the marketing group to understand where the cost is and cost line is. Obviously, as you're going down through here, you're not going to actually accumulate the remaining cost and the actual cost used in a lot of cases. So this is an after effect of doing the process. But nevertheless, at least you have a budget for it and what all the travel and all those expenses are. And then when you actually do the process or travel, then you're identifying what happened. If it was different, say for example, you estimated a car rental for $100 and it turned out to be $150. That would be something that you'd want to identify. Or maybe when you got to the client's location, they hit you with something that you didn't expect and it's an extra expense, then you'd have to put that in there. This carries on all the way through the portal for every task that we're talking about. If you're the guy that's doing the specifications, you're listed as a guy that's doing the specifications, and what is your cost to produce so many things from the specification, and how long it will take you to figure out the specification and produce whatever level specification that you have to build. Maybe it's an engineering thing, or electronics, or mechanical, or maybe services of some sort. Whatever it is, you have to identify that in a spec, especially if you're going to a vendor. If you're going to a vendor, you have to have a quote from the vendor. So those would be services that you'd have to identify and show that they are cost estimates that are included in these areas up here. Like other would be vendor expense. Maybe you had to do something or bring something to a vendor where you had to ship it. There's all those kinds of things you have to consider when you're doing a project, including the timeline that it's taking it to get done. Okay, with that being said, you can see that you would continue from when you're doing the proposal and breaking down each element, that you're supposed to work your way down through that. Now, depending on the size of your company, it might be a simple proposal and it won't take you but it maybe with all the different engineers and draftsmen and people that are doing specifications and drawings and all that, it may be fairly simple. But you still have to have, once you win the bid, you have to understand the vendor cost, the inventory items you have to purchase, and the cost related to those. So this is where you're at. We'll be continuing with this particular Manpower Portal throughout the blue area until we get the budget all figured out. So we're going to come back to this as we're going down through the rest of these in planning and scheduling, to come back and look at, do we meet our cost and scheduling? So let's go ahead and stop for now, and the next place we're going to go is looking at project scheduling. Thank you.